Okay, so are you ready to dive into the world of Osho?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
You've given us selections from his book Sex Matters, From Sex to Superconsciousness, and
Mm.
and let's just say
Yeah.
he doesn't hold back.
No, he does not.
We're going to unpack his take on love, sex, and even society
Right.
and see how it all ties into reaching a higher state of consciousness.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think what's striking is how Osho tackles the elephant in the room,
Mhm.
the one that many spiritual teachers kind of tiptoe around,
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah, you said it.
He seems to use the controversy,
He does.
surrounding it as a springboard to challenge conventional thinking.
He comes right out swinging,
Yeah.
calling out what he sees as hypocrisy in how society,
Hmm.
especially organized religion,
Yes.
deals with sex. Preaching love on one hand,
Mm-hmm.
but creating this atmosphere of fear and guilt around sex on the other.
And that's precisely what he argues keeps us fixated on sex.
Okay.
The societal and religious suppression, as he sees it,
Okay.
blocks us from experiencing true love and reaching a higher state of consciousness.
So instead of pushing sex away,
Right.
he suggests we embrace it.
Well, he says
That's certainly turning things upside down.
it is a bold claim. And it's interesting the way he looks at it.
Okay.
He compares this suppression to damming up a river.
Okay.
Sure, you might contain it temporarily,
Right.
but the pressure builds,
Mhm.
and the eventual breaking point becomes messier than if it had just been allowed to flow naturally.
That's a powerful analogy.
It is.
I like that. It makes you think about all the things we try to suppress, not just sex,
Right.
our habits, cravings, even certain emotions.
Absolutely.
Is it possible that by constantly resisting, we're actually giving those things more power?
Exactly. That's what he calls the law of reverse effect.
Okay.
And he illustrates this brilliantly
Uh,
with the story of a farmer who becomes ridiculously fixated on hiding the fact that he's wearing borrowed clothes.
what?
The more he tries to conceal it, the more attention he draws to himself.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Okay, that's hilarious.
it is a funny story.
And so relatable.
Yeah.
You mentioned struggling with procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
Could this idea of suppression backfiring apply to your tendency to avoid tasks until the last minute?
It's certainly something to consider.
Yeah.
Perhaps by constantly resisting those tasks, I'm inadvertently giving them more power.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
It's a new way to look at it.
This is where Osho's teachings start to feel very practical.
I can see that.
But here's where things get even more intriguing.
Okay.
He doesn't just stop at saying we need to embrace sex.
Right.
He goes on to suggest it can be a gateway to spiritual awakening.
That's right. He introduces the term sex samadhi,
Okay, hold on.
describing how prolonged conscious lovemaking has the potential to lead to a heightened state of consciousness,
Okay.
much like what's achieved through deep meditation.
Hold on. Sex samadhi. For those of us who aren't familiar with that term,
Sure.
could you unpack that a bit more?
Of course.
Yeah.
Think of it as a state of blissful union achieved through deeply conscious and connected lovemaking. It's about transforming the sexual experience from something purely physical to something deeply spiritual.
So it's about tapping into a different kind of energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He refers to it as a superatom, this primal energy that, when harnessed correctly, can catapult us into a different state of being.
It's almost as if we've been handed this powerful tool for spiritual growth, but instead of learning how to use it, we're
Yeah.
too afraid to even touch it.
Well, he makes a similar point with the story of the 100-year fan.
Okay.
A king buys this seemingly delicate fan,
Mm-hmm.
yet it breaks after a week.
Oh, no.
Turns out he was using it completely wrong, assuming it was fragile when it was actually quite durable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he's suggesting we often misunderstand and misuse sex,
Yeah.
treating it as something superficial or even wrong, when in reality it has the potential to be so much more.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this mistreatment, as Osho sees it, has wider consequences.
Okay.
He argues that humanity's negative relationship with sex is a root cause of the frustration, violence, and lack of genuine connection we see in the world today.
Yeah. He paints a pretty bleak picture of society, saying it's become a breeding ground for dysfunction, with each generation becoming further removed from experiencing real love and fulfillment.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
If we re-examine our relationship with sex,
Yeah,
could we shift the direction society is heading in?
right.
Osho certainly seems to think so, and it's a topic he explores further in his thoughts on conscious procreation.
Okay. It's a heavy thought, but you're right. Osho does seem to offer a way forward.
Yeah.
We're going to dig into his concept of conscious procreation soon. But before we do, there's another layer to his view on sex we should unpack.
Okay.
His comparison of sex to meditation.
Right.
He seems to imply that both can lead to a similar state of transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work exactly?
Well, that's where his concept of samadhi comes into play,
Okay.
which he says is achievable through both paths.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about sex samadhi earlier?
Yes.
Osho suggests both deep meditation and conscious lovemaking can lead to the state of expanded consciousness.
So it's not about choosing one over the other,
Right.
but rather recognizing they both tap into something deeper within us.
Exactly.
Okay.
He even suggests that someone who feels naturally celibate in this life may have achieved a profound state of sex samadhi in a past life, leading them to be born with a different relationship to sexual desire in this one.
Oh, wow.
It's fascinating food for thought, isn't it?
It really makes you question those assumptions we often have about desire and spirituality.
It does.
Yeah.
And this is where Osho's ideas challenge the traditional narrative.
Okay.
He even draws a comparison to Freud, acknowledging his contributions to psychology, but suggesting Freud, like many others, didn't fully grasp the spiritual potential of sex.
So while Freud focused on the psychological aspect of sex,
Right.
Osho felt there was a whole other dimension related to our spiritual evolution that was being overlooked.
Precisely.
Wow.
Osho felt Freud fixated on the individual psyche, without fully exploring sex's potential to lead us beyond the ego towards a state of unity and transcendence.
Okay, that makes sense. It seems like a lot of his teachings are about breaking down those ego-driven barriers we erect.
Right.
Like his thoughts on nudity, for example. He talks about how our obsession with covering up comes from this deep-rooted fear of our natural state,
Yes.
a fear instilled by society and religion.
And he contrasts this with animals who are comfortable in their natural state.
Right.
He even suggests our clothes, rather than hiding our nakedness,
Yeah.
actually highlight it by drawing attention to what's hidden beneath.
It's like he's pointing out a paradox. The more we try to hide something,
Yes.
the more fixated we become on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this fear of nudity, according to Osho, is just another symptom of our discomfort with our own instincts, with that raw primal energy that sex represents.
Okay.
He even uses the example of the Khajuraho temples in India, with their erotic sculptures.
Those temples are stunning.
They are incredible.
But I can see how some people might find them a bit much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Osho points out they weren't meant to incite lust.
Oh.
Instead, he suggests they served as a way for people to confront their sexual energy head on.
Okay.
And through that confrontation, find a path to transcend it through meditation.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it completely flips the script on how we typically view those types of depictions.
Right.
Okay.
It gets at the heart of his point about embracing the sacredness of sex
Okay.
by recognizing it as a natural, powerful force rather than something to be feared or shunned.
Right.
We can begin to harness its energy for growth.
Okay. So we've talked about the spiritual aspect, but let's get into the practical implications of Osho's ideas. He talks about a future where conscious procreation leads to a more spiritually evolved humanity.
Right.
But what does that even mean?
Right.
What does conscious procreation look like in real life?
That's a question Osho tackles head on.
Okay.
He argues that right now procreation is mostly accidental, driven by lust and a lack of awareness.
Right.
We're essentially creating life without much thought, resulting in children who inherit our anxieties and issues.
Yeah. He uses the term byproducts of sexuality to describe how children are currently brought into the world.
Yeah.
It's a stark way of putting it.
It is, but he also offers a different perspective.
Okay.
He suggests that approaching sex with awareness, intention, and deep connection with our partner can create the right conditions for a more consciously conceived and therefore more spiritually evolved generation.
So it's not about abstaining from sex or procreation,
Right.
but rather transforming our approach to it,
It's a-
making it a more conscious and connected act.
He uses the analogy of a plane journey.
Okay.
We board a plane to reach a destination, and once we arrive, we don't just sit there.
Right.
Similarly, sex can be a vehicle to reach a higher state of awareness.
Okay.
And from that place, we can consciously choose to procreate if we desire,
Right.
but from a place of love and intention rather than just instinct.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah.
But how does this idea of conscious procreation connect to his larger point about the state of the world?
Well, Osho believes this shift in consciousness is essential for the evolution of our species.
Okay.
He sees our current approach to sex fueled by repression and fear. as a major factor contributing to the violence, conflict, and suffering in the world.
Wow.
He's saying that by healing our relationship with sex, we can start to heal the world. It's a bold claim.
It is. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that connection a bit more.
Sure.
How does he see repressed sexuality manifesting in such destructive ways on a global scale?
Osho argues that when we suppress a natural force like sexual energy, it doesn't just disappear.
Right.
It gets channeled in other ways,
Okay.
often in distorted and unhealthy forms. He points to things like violence, addiction, and even political and social conflicts
Right.
as examples of this repressed energy
Yeah.
finding an outlet. He believes that by becoming more comfortable with our sexuality, by approaching it with awareness and acceptance rather than shame, we can start to heal these deeper wounds and create a more peaceful and harmonious world.
That's a powerful thought. It makes you wonder if many of the issues we face as a society stem from this fundamental discomfort with our own nature.
It's certainly something to ponder.
Yeah.
And it speaks to Osho's belief in the interconnectedness of all things.
Right.
He's not just talking about individual healing here, but a collective shift in consciousness.
So if we were to apply this idea of conscious procreation to the world today, what might that look like? I mean, it's a pretty radical concept to wrap our heads around. It's definitely a big shift from how we normally think about having children. But if we're talking about reshaping society,
Right.
Osho doesn't stop there.
Right.
He also challenges our pursuit of spirituality.
Saying even that can be a form of escapism.
He does make that point, doesn't he?
Right.
He suggests some people use religion to avoid dealing with their own baggage, their desires, their fears,
Right.
hiding behind rituals and dogma, instead of doing the real inner work.
It's like they're trying to build a house from the roof down.
Right.
Osho seems to be emphasizing that real spiritual growth requires honesty,
Yeah,
self-awareness, and facing the not-so-pretty parts of ourselves.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this idea of escapism goes beyond just organized religion.
Okay.
He applies it to society at large, pointing to our obsession with technology, entertainment, anything for that instant gratification,
Right.
as a way of avoiding the big questions about life, death, and our place in the universe. It's like we're constantly bombarded with distractions, making it that much easier to avoid being alone with our thoughts.
He even uses the example of sleeping pills,
Okay.
predicting that in the future, people will be so reliant on external crutches to fall asleep, they'll forget how to do it naturally.
That's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
It is a scary thought.
Yeah, you start to see the parallels to how we treat sex as well.
Right.
This reliance on external means to numb ourselves or escape from discomfort rather than confronting the root of the issue.
Exactly. It all ties back to that fear of facing ourselves, of acknowledging our natural instincts. We build dams around these natural energies like sex instead of learning how to channel them in a healthy way.
And those dams, according to Osho, have far-reaching consequences. He doesn't just see it as a personal struggle, but something that's impacting us on a global scale, right?
Right. He argues that this repressed energy, this fear of our natural selves, is a major contributor to the dysfunction and violence we see in the world. It's a pretty sobering thought.
It is. But you mentioned Osho offers a path forward.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to dismantle those dams?
Well, he says it starts with awareness,
Okay.
with a willingness to look within, to examine our fears, and challenge the beliefs we've been taught. From there, it's about reclaiming the sacredness of sex, seeing it as a natural force, a source of energy that can be used for both creation and destruction.
So it's about learning to harness that power instead of letting it control us.
Exactly.
So much of what we've discussed today seems to come back to that idea, taking ownership of our experiences, whether it's our sexuality, our spirituality, or even just our daily choices.
Exactly. And from that place of awareness and ownership,
Right.
we can then start to cultivate a more expansive love, a love that goes beyond ourselves, a love for humanity, for nature, for the universe itself.
He calls it a total education in loving, which sounds pretty all-encompassing.
It is. It's about approaching life with a deep sense of reverence and compassion, recognizing that interconnectedness he talks about so often.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Osho's world, what are you left with?
Yeah.
What stands out to you the most?
You know, for me, it's that challenge to be more honest with myself,
Yeah,
to really examine my relationship with desire, with those things I try to suppress,
right.
and to see if maybe, just maybe, there's another way to approach them.
It's like he's encouraging us to question everything.
Yeah.
Our beliefs, our behaviors, even those things we hold sacred.
Absolutely.
And to do it with a sense of curiosity rather than judgment.
Absolutely. And at the heart of it all is this message of love, this radical, expansive love that has the power to heal, to transform, to connect us to something greater than ourselves.
It's been quite a journey exploring Osho's perspective. His ideas are definitely challenging, sometimes even shocking.
Yeah.
But they also offer a different way of seeing the world,
Right.
a different way of being in the world that I think is worth considering.
Definitely.
So as you continue exploring his work, what resonates most with you?
Yeah.
What questions are you carrying forward? Keep diving deep, and who knows what you might discover.